I'm Jared Dillian, and welcome to the Be Smart podcast and how not to be an idiot with your money, because there is a lot of that going around. Let's get back to basics here. We've been talking about inflation. We've been talking about crypto. Kind of gotten off track. I want to get us back to basics. So again, the core thesis. What are the two sources of financial stress? The two sources of financial stress are debt and risk. That's it. There's no other sources of financial stress. Everything else is a derivative of debt and risk. There's not 10 sources of financial stress. There's just two. Everything else comes from debt and risk. And let me just reiterate, not having money is not a source of financial stress. It's not. If you don't have money, you just make do with what you have. There are plenty of people who make $25,000 a year and they have no financial stress. I know some of these people. I live in Myrtle Beach. I talk to these people. They're the happiest people in the world. They make $25,000 a year and they're perfectly happy. They have no financial stress. They don't have a high standard of living, but that is not a source of financial stress. So let's talk about debt. Now, I am not one of these people who says that you should never have debt under any circumstances. And there are people who say that. They say that debt is evil. And there are some parts of the world where nobody is allowed to have debt. And let's just say that nothing good is happening in those parts of the world. So some debt is good. A judicious amount of debt can be good. The vast majority of people will get a mortgage to buy a house. The vast majority of people will get a loan to buy a car, even if they shouldn't. Everyone has credit cards, and everyone knows about the screwed up student loan situation. So a little bit of debt is okay. Too much debt is bad. This may seem obvious, but most of the advice out there is either to have no debt or lots of debt. So at the moment, I have no debt. Although I will have debt soon when I start building the house, and that is going to stress me out. So why do it? Well, because I want the dream house. So I am willing to put up with a little bit of stress in order to get what I want. And by the way, this is just sort of a metaphysical thing to talk about, but you can't go through life without experiencing stress. We are all here to feel a little bit of stress. And even if you could, it wouldn't be desirable because you don't grow as a person without a little bit of stress. So I am going to experience a little bit of stress as a result of this debt, and I am going to grow as a person. So how do you know when you have too much debt? Simple answer, you have too much debt when you are worried about making the payments. If you're worried about making that monthly payment, then you have too much debt. If you're laying awake at night thinking about it, then you have too much debt. Now, I have never, ever been in that position, not even close. And by the way, if you are carrying a balance on your credit card, it means that at some point you couldn't make the payment, which means that you have too much debt. So if you are carrying a balance on your credit card, by definition, you have too much debt, and that means that tens of millions of people have too much debt. Now, the thing about financial stress is that it's completely unnecessary. It's avoidable. You don't have to experience financial stress if you don't want to, and for some people, it sure seems like they want to. And financial stress compounds all other kinds of stress. If you have marriage stress, financial stress makes that worse. If you have stress about your kids, financial stress makes that worse. If you have a substance abuse problem, financial stress makes that worse. People get divorced over financial stress. People die over financial stress. It kills people. I'm serious. Remember the story? This was a couple years ago. This is all about Robin Hood. There was a young guy, he was about 22 years old, and he was trading options in Robinhood, and he was looking at his balances, and he saw like a big margin balance of like minus $800,000, but he thought that it was a loss. So he killed himself. on the belief that he had lost $800,000. I'll give you a piece of advice. Don't kill yourself over money. Okay. I've seen that happen before. It's a shame, and it's the biggest waste ever. What is the worst that happens? We're talking about financial stress here. What is the worst that happens? What's the worst thing that can possibly happen? You go bankrupt. Well, that's not bad. Going bankrupt isn't bad. Going bankrupt is fucking awesome. It's amazing. You get rid of all your debt and you get to start over. Of course, you're like a financial leper for 7 years, but time heals that. And after a while, you can borrow again. But I know lots of people that have gone bankrupt and they've come out the other side, and most of them learn their lesson. There are also some folks that carry a balance on their credit card for no reason. They have the ability to pay it off, but they don't. They have the cash and they carry around this balance on their credit card, which is charging them interest. And it's like they just like having the debt around. It's familiar to them. It's like Stockholm syndrome. It's a very weird phenomenon. I know a guy that borrowed about $550,000 to buy a house and kept that debt around for 20 years, even though he was making $3 million a year. There's no reason to do that. Just pay it off. When I have debt, I am in a big hurry to get rid of it. Okay. I'll let you in on a little secret. I don't always make money in the markets. Okay. I'm not some kind of magician. I'm probably a better than average investor. I don't always make money in the markets. Sometimes I lose my ass, and I am capable of losing everything if I really screw up. So I don't want to be in a position where I have debt and losses, because that would be the worst thing in the world. Here's a question for you. Is reducing financial stress the most important thing in the world? Is it the most important thing in the world? What else could you possibly do? Well, you could make shitloads of money. What if your ambition exceeds your desire to minimize stress? If you want to be Jeff Bezos, your life is going to be more complicated and you're going to experience financial stress. Jeff Bezos didn't have any debt, but he had a lot of stock in Amazon, and that stock was down 90% at one point. If you remember, being down 90% will cause you some stress. And he didn't have a hedge of any kind. He just ate shit the whole way down. So if you want to play with the big boys, if you want to get involved in big business, you're going to have to take some risk and you're going to have stress. So I generally don't have financial stress, but occasionally I will have a trade go sideways and it will cause me some consternation, but that's about as far as it gets. And, speaking of Bitcoin, there's a lot of people who have gotten rich off of Bitcoin, and they have taken massive drawdowns along the way, and they are in the process of taking one right now. And that's my primary objection to Bitcoin. I don't have any philosophical disagreements with Bitcoin like some people do. My disagreement with Bitcoin is the volatility. The volatility makes it impossible for you to have an outsized position. And there are some people who have outsized positions and they are nuts. They are nuts. I'm talking about plain vanilla debt stress in your everyday life. One thing I do every month when I pay my credit card bill, I go back and I look at the statement and I look to see if I spent money on anything stupid. Okay. So this month, one of my cards had a balance of $1,700, and I went back in all the transactions and I went to see if I bought any stupid stuff. And honestly, the biggest purchase on the credit card for that month was $330. My wife wanted a pressure washer for Christmas, so I ordered it off of HomeDepot.com. It got delivered to the house. And that was my biggest purchase of the month, was a $330 pressure washer. So, I don't have any debt stress. I don't, and it's nice. I have fat stress, okay? I'm a big fat blob, and it stresses me out. And maybe there's a podcast out there that talks about being a big fat blob. My brother is 52 years old, okay? and he is in peak physical condition. The guy is like a bodybuilder, but his financial life is kind of a mess. I'm a big fat blob, but financially I'm doing great. And I've told him a bunch of times, he needs to move to South Carolina. We can live across the street from each other, and he can take me to the gym, and I'll straighten out his finances, and we can get ourselves in physical and financial shape. That's it for me today. Thanks for listening to the Be Smart podcast. I'm Jared Dillian. See you later.